Oh, and tomorrow we will have a festival. And the servant said, Gurudev, we have, how will we have a festival? We have no boga, we have no money, nothing. He said, festival means fasting and chanting. Simply fasting and chanting all day long. That is festival. Wouldn't be very attractive in our movement, perhaps, for most of us. But it's more than just the externals. The externals are there. They're very important to help us to understand the internal essence of the meaning of the festival, or the meaning of just what Krishna consciousness is, to help us in that regard. So we'll sing this song, written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Beautiful song. Dust. I thought of this because this morning I picked something up off the floor and I couldn't see what it was. I said to Vidura, is this something special? Is it Tulsi or what is it? He said, oh no, it's just dust. So, this is very special because this song describes dust. The dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to, I think that's a typo mistake, to devotional service. Well, service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creeper of divine love. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami. Well, it was yesterday. For they are the mother of devotion. Madhavatiti Bhakti Janani. Yes, these festivals are described here as mothers of devotion. Ochan was also saying, reminding me that Prabhupada said he could give us a festival every day. Read that yesterday actually in the Zoom class. And Srila Prabhupada was saying, for enthusiasm, if you're lacking enthusiasm, Prabhupada said, then you should arrange festivals. And everybody should be engaged in service. Then everyone will become enthusiastic. And the Prabhupada said then, I can give you a festival every day. And this was a letter to Swati in, I think, 1971. But Prabhupada said that to Tamal Krishna Maharaj also. When Tamal Krishna Maharaj was in LA, he was doing regular drama. And Prabhupada very much liked it. He said, I can give every day you can have like this festival. A different drama every day. Well, it's maybe twice a year we put on a drama, I don't know, 3 times, whatever. But Prabhupada very much liked this. In 11th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, we see Uddhavas emphasizing how the subject matter of Krishna consciousness can be presented in the form of drama. And other forms too, of course. But it's one way that this, at least the pastimes and some of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness sinks in. And it stays there. People remember it, the philosophy coming and going. But dramatic presentation, song presentation goes deep. Just like these songs, Bhaktivinoda Thakur also maybe, but especially Narottam Das, compiled simple songs in simple Bengali, because people couldn't read. They're illiterate as far as reading books is concerned. So they digest, imbibe the philosophy of Krishna consciousness through song. So he compiled many wonderful songs, which even to today, at least in Bengal and places, maybe other parts of India, people sing these songs, and they're constantly remembering Lord Chaitanya, Mahaprabhu. They're remembering the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. They're remembering the importance of sadhu sangha. They're remembering the importance of chanting without offense. They're remembering all the various qualities which are to be cultivated in order to please Krishna. And only by pleasing Krishna can we become devotees. We serve the pure devotee of the Lord. He gives us guidance, and by following the pure devotee's instruction, Krishna is pleased. And then gradually, through Shushrosha Dhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi, he cleanses our hearts. Krishna cleanses the heart. Shrinvatam Sakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. He cleanses the heart. He's the cleaner. He's Pavitram. We can do our part. But ultimately the purification of our consciousness is by the grace of Krishna, by the mercy of Krishna. We do our best to try to serve Krishna, to remember Krishna, but ultimately it's up to him. He's the source of knowledge, forgetfulness, remembrance, everything is coming from Krishna. So we'll read on. The dust of the lotus feet of pure devotees is conducive to devotional service. And that dust, you can take it literally, is good. If you take it literally, then just spend your whole day cleaning the temple. Good service, huh? Cleaning all the dust. That's the spiritual world. The gopis are cleaning. It's perfectly clean, but they continue to clean. Cleansing, Gundisha Marjan. Our devotional service is, practically speaking, a process of cleansing. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Cleaning. So much dirt. We have no shortage of cleaning to do. Not just the external, internal. So much cleaning to do. So the dust of the lotus feet, it can be taken externally, cleaning their temple, keeping everything very clean, keeping our homes clean, keeping everything clean, our clothes, keep everything clean. That's one way we can understand it. The other way is the internal. We take the instructions, the lotus feet, the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotees, the instructions which they give us. They're giving, this is like the dust of their lotus feet. The pure devotees are like the dust of Krishna's lotus feet, manifested in this world. And the pure devotees give their vani, their instructions, so that we can take shelter of those instructions. It can be taken literally also, that's a nice sentiment, but the realization or the purification really comes when we actually embrace the instruction of the spiritual master as our life and soul. Just like Srila Prabhupada embraced his spiritual master's instruction to preach this Krishna consciousness movement, especially in the form of books all over the world, preaching Krishna consciousness. He embraced that instruction, so he got the mercy of the Lord in its fullest extent. Service to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root. We've got to get down to the root of the tender creeper of devotion. As we all know, when we're trying to remove the weeds from the garden. Giri Govardhan is very experienced in this regards. We can't just pluck them off at the top. We may do that also, but that doesn't really solve the real problem. To get right down to the root. Remove the roots, or destroy the roots. Somehow or another, we've got to stop it from reproducing. Our material desires, we may stop them, but they're still there, and they're seedling forms. And give them half a chance, they grow up again. You see, if we're not very careful, Rupa Goswami said, Kindvadra Manudinam, we have to be very, very careful in our chanting and hearing. Otherwise, there's every risk that those seeds of material desire will start to grow up again. They get like, Prabhupada gives the example, is like when there's a flood, those seeds can't grow. So he said, similarly, when there's a flood of devotional service, even though the seeds are there, they will not grow. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that inattentive chanting sows the seeds. The seeds are actually there, but it sows the seeds of material desire, or allows the other offenses to sprout. Attentive chanting, they can't sprout. They may be there. Desires may come and go, but they will not manifest in terms of producing, let's say, anarthas, producing obstacles in that sense, destroying our enthusiasm in devotional service. We have to be careful. Hearing and chanting the holy name of Krishna. Serving, to be very careful not to offend the Vaishnavas, and so on. Different directions are given there. And if we apply the directions, then it may take some time, There's always bumps even on the royal road. The risks are there. There are bumps when we go along the road, but we don't stop. We carry on, being careful when we drive. Be very careful. There's danger, no doubt. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadashi and Janmastami, for they are the mother of devotion. We all need mothers. Child needs mothers. Spiritually speaking, we're children. We're still carrying all of our previous samskaras, our attachments and so on. We're not so mature. We need mothers. We've all seen and experienced how special it is when we come together for a festival, bathing the Lord, Abhishek, Kirtan, hearing about the glories of the Lord or his pure devotees. In the material world, people get so much excitement, right, when it's their birthday, isn't it? The children, when it's their birthday, they get so excited. What presents will I get for my birthday? And they're hoping all their best friends will come, and they'll have games, and nice chocolate cakes, and all kinds of delicious things. And they're very excited. We look forward to Christmas. We look forward to our summer holiday. Holy Day. The holiday comes from Holy Day festival. We look forward to this. It's just socially normal. But it's not spiritually beneficial unless it's centered on Krishna. So these days, we may be very... my birthday. We like to receive things on our birthday, praise, money, presents, whatever, tasty things. But when that tendency is directed towards the pure devotees on their birthday, or even their Tirobhav, their disappearance days, it becomes very, very purifying. And it helps us to become free. Just like in Vedic culture, on one's birthday, the child gives gifts. He doesn't receive gifts, he gives gifts. It frees us of this bodily identification, this false ego, envy and pride and jealousy. We give gifts, whatever is within one's means. Actually, it's better because every day of the year you get gifts, because every day of the year is someone's birthday and you get a gift. It's nice. The whole Vedic system is so scientific. It's to help free us from ahankara, false ego, and put Krishna in the center, step by step. So these festivals, at whatever level they're on, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes in Sri Chaitanya Shastakam how even ordinary festivals in a Vedic culture can be favorable for the cultivation ultimately of Krishna consciousness. Maybe not directly, but they help bring people together. They help bring some social cohesion in the Varna ashram system. The Brahmins come, they may do some yajna, they chant some mantras, there'll be a bhajan group playing kirtan, playing different songs related to Krishna. All kinds of different things are intertwined into the festival. It's not just a marriage or a birthday or a local festivity. It has, all of them have some connection with the ultimate goal of life in Vedic culture. So they're also not to be discouraged, because people on that materialistic platform need that. They're not ready yet just to transcend. The gradual, everything has its part. As my dwelling place, I choose the greatest of reverence and love, the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna, just like this temple, Vishnu Jan Prabhu. I don't think he's here now. Is he here? Somewhere. He says, yes, New Mayapur, none different than Mayapur. It's none different than Mayapur. We were saying the other day, Kirtan, center of Kirtan, New Mayapur. Say, yes, none different than Mayapur. The matter of our consciousness, isn't it? The problem is that wherever the pure devotee is, that is Vrindavan. That is Vrindavan. Wherever pure devotional service, that is the holy Dham. And this purpose here is to give, or to reveal the holy Dham, the presence of Krishna, the Dham. And that's what the temples are for. They're not just living quarters, places to execute our own agendas. They're actually facilities to reveal the Dham, the spirit of Krishna consciousness. That's what we're here for, to facilitate this. We may not be doing as good a job as we could, but that's the purpose. And that's why Prabhupada said more the temple, especially the temple, this is a farm community also, but especially the temple, kirtan, hearing and chanting, etc. The more that goes on, the better. And that doesn't mean instead of, as well as. Not instead of, as well as other services to their lordships. And we can chant while we do other things. That was the mood, which, I don't know directly speaking, but that was certainly the mood that was prevalent, prominent amongst devotees perhaps still is amongst all of you, but it was certainly prevalent in the early 70s, very much so. Whatever service we were doing, chanting the holy names was there. Even while doing the arti, we would be chanting Hare Krishna while doing the arti. Oftentimes no one else is there, the Vajari is leading the kirtan. Prabhupada wasn't so much into all the 1, 2, 3s. He was more into the Hare Krishnas. Everything. Some things we can't. We have other things to do or speak. But as much as possible, the chanting would go on, as well as other services simultaneously. Cleaning, serving, different things, chanting. The whole temple. One of the most prominent remembrances I've got when I first came as a guest was when we were cleaning the temple, everyone would clean, and there would be a kirtan throughout the whole temple. Bury place was like 7 stories high from basement to the attic. And from bottom to top, everyone was one big kirtan going on, everyone chanting the Maha Mantra throughout the whole temple. So nice. In the kitchen, all the devotees would be chanting while they were cutting, cooking, cleaning, whatever they're doing. It was so nice. Just constantly remembering the holy name of Krishna. Festival. Real festival. All those places where my Lord Gaur Sundar traveled for pastimes, I will visit in the company of loving devotees. Just like here, Prabhupada came here 3 times, and it's feel that special presence of Srila Prabhupada. The only place, now we know that, the only temple in Europe, because England is no longer in Europe, cast out in the ocean somewhere, UK. The only place remaining in Europe where Prabhupada, ISKCON place, of course he went other places, but they're not in ISKCON anymore. Somebody else is living there. Where devotees are still living, this is the only place in Europe where Prabhupada went. New Mayapur. The only one left. Very special place. Upon my mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the Mridanga, sweet Mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of kirtan ordained by Lord Gaurchandra, my heart dances in ecstasy, because you have other instruments now, not so much here in France, but in some countries they like this djembe, boom, 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 jungle drum, something we call it, heavy boom, boom, boom. But the drum, the Mridanga's descent is to be an expansion of Krishna's flute, has appeared as part of the Sankirtan movement. It has come directly along with part of the Sankirtan, with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared to spread the Sankirtan movement along with Mridanga and kartals. These are the 2 primary instruments for the dissemination of the holy name, to embellish the sweet sound of Hare Krishna. The sweet Mridanga and the sweet kartals, very unique, very special, transcendental instruments descended to this world. By beholding, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple, Shri Shri Radha Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's prasadam, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Honoring. Sometimes we forget the word honor. We eat. By eating the prasadam, I feel good. That's not what Bhaktivinoda said. By honoring the Lord's prasadam, I conquer over all worldly illusions. honoring, respecting the prasadam. That's Krishna's mercy. Goloka Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Just on the note of prasadam, I mean, of course every devotee has respect for prasadam, no doubt, to whatever degree. But little things, small thing we could say. I know when we were taught never to leave any prasadam on the plate. It's like almost a rule of the temple. And if one speck fell on the ground, you had to pick it up and put it to your head like this. Of course, you have to use common sense, but in those days we didn't have much common sense, I guess. I don't know. We just put it in our mouth. We would never, and even leftovers, because sometimes the guests would not finish everything on their plates. So everything was put into one bucket. A bucket. The leftover, never thrown in the bin. Never ever would we throw prasadam in the garbage bin. Always a special bucket for leftovers. We'd do everything we could not to waste leftovers. And the guest leftovers after the Sunday feast predominantly form chop suey on Monday morning. You know what chop suey is? You know what chop suey is? Yeah, it comes from Hong Kong or somewhere like that, Canton. And there's a fact, they used to take all the leftovers in the restaurant and mix it all together, and it became known as chop suey. Whatever it was. Because Prabhupada says not to do that after a while because it's not very healthy.
In America, they call it
Merge. Splurge, merge, whatever. But it's everybody's leftovers cooked together, can you believe it? And some devotees would actually take that as their breakfast. There was one devotee who used to do that. He used to just look in the bin, and that was his breakfast. And he got very sick. He stopped it. It's not healthy. It's not good. And we give that to other living entities. Anyway, but respecting prasadam, very, it's more important than we think sometimes. We don't realize how special it is. We forget. I think it's a typical example of that. I don't know what happened here. Lost the page there. What page is it on? Huh? 52? Not in my book. That's Bogart. Oh, here it is. 50. Good. Goloka Vrindavan appears in my home whenever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is a river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord, my happiness knows no bounds. I wonder when are they going to have the lockdown in India opened up? When are we going to be able to go to India again? Anybody know? Any news? No?
There's supposed to be some news now at New Year. But
nothing came, huh? But still, the borders are locked, huh?
They just said that they still have closed the borders to the UK. That's the news.
Yeah, UK is the present hotspot. But India is still locked down, I think. What to do? You have to meditate on the river Ganga and the river Jamuna. A river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of the Lord. My happiness knows no bounds. Let's all meditate on Ganga Devi, that river flowing through Mayapur, the Jamuna flowing through Vrindavan. The wonderfulness, purifying our hearts by their touch. The sight of the holy Tulsi tree soothes my soul, for I know that she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring shak, a green, leafy vegetable preparation, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Shak, very wonderful preparation. Whatever Bhaktivinoda Thakur obtains that is conducive for the service to Sri Krishna, he accepts every day with the greatest of joy. Jai. Right. Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. So this is harmonium. Anyone can play 2-beat on the Madanga? A 2-beat. Shuddha Bhakata Charana Renu Bhajananukula I have to go down over there. Bhakata Seva Parama Siddhi Premalati Karamula Bhakata Seva Parama Siddhi Madhavatiti Bhakti Janani Chaitanya Palana Kori Madhavatiti Janani Chaitanya Palana Kori Krishna Basati Bari Parama Arude Gori Krishna Basati Bari Parama Arude Gori Goramar Yesabastani Kavala Brahmana Range Ora Amara Yesabastani Kavala Brahmana Range Yesabastani Heri Bhavani Pranaye Bhakata Sange Ramani Pranaye Bhakata Sange Mridanga Badhya Shunite Mahana Abhasara Sadajate Gorabita Kirtana Shuni Anande Hridoya Nache Jugalamoti Ekiyamor Paramandoya Galamoti Ekiyamor Paramandoya Prasada Seva Karite Hoya Sakala Prapancha Jaya Sada Seva Karite Hoya Sakala Prapancha Jaya Jedinagi Bhajana Deki Vihete Goloka Bhaya Inagri Bhajana Deki Vihete Goloka Bhaya Charana Siddhu Dekiya Ganga Sukhanasi Mapaya Paramasidhu Dekiya Ganga Sukhanasim Paya Tulasi Deki Churaya Prana Madhava Toshani Jani Gaura Priya Shaka Sevani Jivana Sartaka Mani Bhakti Vinoda Krishna Bhajane Anukula Payaja Pratidivase Paramasuke Shikara Koro Yeta Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale. Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Vicharine Navasesha Singhavati Pastachari Shatani. So we're continuing the reading from the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, The Price Affair. Now, if any of you would like to have this book, there's 2 books in this series, or a 7-volume set of Prabhupada Lilamrita in English, you may have to pay for it, but you can ask me. It's the price affair. It's a good price. But we're about to order Prabhupada Lilamritas. Unfortunately, not yet in French. We did have about a dozen French Your Ever Well wishers recently, but they've all gone. And we're just about to reorder the English ones. So if you're interested, please see me today or tomorrow. Anyone else? Because we're going to be making an order from India soon. So I know we're on this page, but I don't know where on this page we are. And I doubt whether anyone will remember either. So I'll just start at the top of the page. Actually, I'll go back one paragraph because it would be otherwise it won't know what's going on. The neophyte devotees in New York felt assurance from their spiritual master's words and by their own experience, Service in separation was a transcendental fact. They were improving in chanting on their beats. And the New York center was going on. So long as kirtan is all right, Prabhupada wrote, there is no difficulty at all. Again, a re-emphasizes the same point. As long as the kirtan is all right, there is no difficulty at all. What means all right kirtan? That's another subject, but all night kirtan? No, all right kirtan. But there was one difficulty. Attempts to purchase a new building, which had gone on smoothly while Prabhupada had been present, had become a great problem as soon as he had left. Shortly after Srila Prabhupada's departure for San Francisco, we're back now in 1967, Prabhupada had been in New York for 1966, and then early 67 he left for San Francisco, leaving his new devotees, his new followers, to run everything in New York. It was quite a... Well, they'd been in the movement a long time. They were very experienced. Some of them had been in the movement even 3 months. Right? They've been initiated as much as 3 months, some of them. They were all devotees. Here we are, we've been in the movement 30 years. No, I can't do that. Oh. After 3 months, they were left behind to do everything. That is a very simple little preaching center, but still, give class, lead kirtan, raise the money, deal with all kinds of different issues amongst themselves and others, keep their following the regulated principles. Just a handful. Shortly after Prabhupada left for San Francisco, Brahmananda had given Mr. Price $1,000. Some arrangement was being made with this man. I don't think his name was actually Mr. Price, but that's the name given in the Lilamrita. They'd given him some money as a down payment on a building. And Mr. Price had promised to help the devotees get their building. When Prabhupada heard this, he became perturbed. Prabhupada wrote, in the opinion of the devotees and the trustees... Oh, is this Prabhupada? I don't know, it doesn't say. That's a quote from somebody. I think it's Prabhupada. In the opinion of the devotees and the trustees here, Prabhupada writing, $1,000 has been risked without any understanding. I know that you are doing your best, but still there has been an error of judgment. I am not at all displeased with you, but they say that Mr. Price will never be able to secure financial help from any other source. He is simply taking time under different pretexts, changing constantly. Therefore, you should not pay even a farthing. You know what a farthing is? Who knows what a farthing is? That's a furlong, huh? Something like that. Farthing. What's a farthing? 1 cent? Yeah, more or less 1 cent. You don't see farthings around much. I got one farthing somewhere, I think. I think it went out of circulation in the 1960s as an English. It was the smallest English coin. You know, like you have a pice in India. We had like a farthing in England, very small coin, not worth anything practically now. But anyway, it means like the smallest denomination of money. Prabhupada was using English, brought up in the English time, so using pounds and like that, and pennies, shillings, pounds, shillings, pence. And you go down to farthings and so on. Denomination. So. Don't give him anything, it means. Don't give him even a pin. Land. Don't give him anything more than what you've already given him. If he wants any more money, you should flatly refuse. Srila Prabhupada remembered Mr. Price and their first meeting, at which the blonde-haired, elegantly dressed businessman, his face tanned even in winter, had addressed him as "Your Excellency." That address alone had made Prabhupada distrust him. Said I was a Calcutta boy. Brought up in Calcutta. Very shrewd. That address, yeah. There was a Bengali saying, "Too much devotion denotes a thief." Prabhupada knew that businessmen were prone to cheat, and American businessmen would be particularly difficult to deal with. They were expert cheaters. Prabhupada's American disciples were innocent children in worldly affairs. He was ready to instruct them step by step, but now, without consulting him, they had become involved in an unbusinesslike transaction, risking $1,000 of the society's money without any written agreement. I mean, these type of things happened a few times, in the Juhu project, right? How the devotees, they gave up, they signed it off. Prabhupada was working so hard to get that Juhu land, and then when Prabhupada went away, someone or other, they just gave up and basically gave it back to that Mr. What was his name? Huh? Nair. Mr. Nair. Mr. Nair. He had certain rasa with Prabhupada. What a rasa he had with Prabhupada, that Nair. Everyone's going back to Godhead, Prabhupada said one time. I said, not Mr. Nair. I said Mr. Nair. Huh? Yeah. Not Mr. Nair. They had such a rasa, it was really unbelievable. Srila Prabhupada had visited the building on Stuyvesant Street, and he wanted it. It was a historical, well-kept, aristocratic building suitable for his New York headquarters. It was worth the $100,000 price if they could afford it, but it was difficult for Prabhupada to know from San Francisco what was going on between Brahmananda and the businessman. And the difficulty increased as letters and phone calls from Brahmananda introduced other persons involved. Aside from Mr. Price, there was Mr. Tyler, the owner, and Mr. Tyler's lawyer, who seemed independent of Mr. Tyler. And finally, there was ISKCON's lawyer, who had also a mind of his own. So you can see there were problems in those days in knowing, who you're dealing with, Although Srila Prabhupada's disciples usually surrendered to his direction, they seemed bent on listening to the businessmen's promise, even though their spiritual master had cautioned them not so, or not to do. Prabhupada became disturbed. His preaching in San Francisco was being threatened by fears that the businessmen would cheat his society of what he had begun in New York. With no responsible advisors to turn to, Srila Prabhupada sometimes discussed the problem with Mukunda and other devotees in his room. Mukunda was not in New York, he was in San Francisco, of course. They all agreed that the transaction seemed highly irregular. Brahmananda was probably being led on by false promises. Brahmananda, however, saw Mr. Price as a rare person, a successful man who really wanted to help the devotees. Although no other respectable businessman had ever shown interest, Mr. Price listened and sympathized, and he would greet the devotees with Hare Krishna. Brahmananda was well aware of the humble economic and social position of the devotees. They were almost all ex-hippies, and they were poor. But here was Mr. Price, a wealthy man with diamond cuff links, who was always glad to see him shake his hand, pat his back, and speak appreciatively of the religion of India and the moral behavior of the small band of devotees. Mr. Price had received a group of devotees as guests in his apartment and said nice things about each one of them. He had said that Hayagriva was an excellent writer, and the Back to Godhead was the best magazine on the market. And if you've seen the Back to Godhead in those days, His mimeograph is just like really rough, pieces of paper stapled together. The best magazine on the market. Yeah. Better than Time or Newsweek. And a mimeographed appearance made it look even better than the slick magazines. He said he would give the devotees a movie projector, and he came close to saying that if he could liquidate some of his money, he would give them the building. Free of charge. Very good offer, huh? Who would not be convinced by such a wonderful, presentation like this? Eh? Brahmananda, who saw Mr. Price a few times a week, would come away intoxicated with high hopes. The Krishna conscious movement could rise to success through this wealthy man's patronage. We get this sometimes. There's actually one rich businessman in this country who's a little bit like this. I won't mention his name, but anyone can see he's not going to give a penny. After leaving Mr. Price's office, Brahmananda would rejoin the devotees in the evening and tell them all that had happened. On nights when there were no public kirtans, the devotees would hold meetings. Swamiji had named them Ishtagostis. An Ishtagosti is not traditionally, it's not a meeting where management, so to speak, that may have another form, or telling the devotees what we're going to do. Whatever. That's something else. Ishtagosti, and it's a ghosty. It's not a ghost. Swamiji had named them Ishtagostis to discuss the instructions of the spiritual master. And the Ishtagostis became dominated by talks of Mr. Price and the building. One night Brahmananda asked for something to work with. It was like earnest money, and it was also... I missed the line there. One night Brahmananda explained why he had given Mr. Price $1,000. Mr. Price had asked for something to work with. It was like earnest money, and it was also for a trip Mr. Price had to take to Pittsburgh to see whether he could release some of his wealth to use in Krishna's service. I mean, if he's such a rich guy, why does he need money for a trip to Pittsburgh, One of the boys asked whether there would be any receipt or written arrangement. Swamiji had taught them to use receipts, at least amongst themselves. Gargamuni and Satsvarupa's treasurer and secretary signed each voucher, and Gargamuni kept the vouchers on file. And that was the system we always used to have. No one could take money from the treasurer without a written voucher for any expenditure. They had to sign it, the treasurer signed it, and eventually when the receipts came back, you signed another voucher, a payment voucher. The treasurer, secretary, sometimes the president, all had to sign it. Everything was documented very carefully. Nowadays, God knows what happens. I don't know if he does. These included requests for items like 50 cents for a hat and $3 for sneakers. Everything was signed by the authorities. Brahmananda said he had mentioned a written statement to Mr. Price but had not pressed the matter. Anyway, it wasn't necessary or even desirable, since they were not simply conducting business with Mr. Price, but were cultivating a relationship. Mr. Price was a well-wisher, a friend, who was helping them as charity. He was going to do big things and use his influence to get the building. This $1,000 was just a gesture to show their interest and to show Mr. Price's friends the devotees were not joking. They had some money. In fact, the devotees had $10,000, $5,000 in small donations, and a $5,000 donation from a wealthy hippie. I wonder where he got that from. You can guess where he got that from, most likely. In addition to donations, the temple had a regular monthly income of $800. Brahmananda's $400 paycheck from his job as a substitute teacher for the New York City public school system, and the $400 paycheck Satsrup earned as a caseworker for the welfare department. So they were giving all of their money. That was the mood then. The devotees would give every penny they got to the temple. They wouldn't keep 1 cent. Both the devotees were in no position to buy any building, and they knew it. All the more reason, Brahmananda explained at Ishtagoshti, why they had to depend on Mr. Price. After all, he reasoned, Swamiji himself had inspired them to look for a $100,000 building. Swamiji knew that they couldn't pay for such a building except in some extraordinary way, and Mr. Price, Brahmananda figured, must be the way. Swamiji wanted the building. No sooner had he reached San Francisco than he had written back, I am very anxious to hear about the final decision on the house. I wish to open the house by the 1st of March, 1967, and arrangement may be done dexterously in this connection. Amazing, huh? Even if they got the place, this is January, even if they got the place, imagine, I want to open it in March. What about all the renovations? Prabhupada wasn't so worried about that. Just get it and begin. Nowadays, 5 years renovation, and then we lose it. Straight away, Prabhupada would go in there. Renovate as you go. The assembled devotees listened to Brahmananda's explanations, sympathized, and added their own understanding of how Krishna and Swamiji were working. There were a very few contrary remarks and opinions, but basically everyone agreed. Brahmananda's dealings with Mr. Price were all right. Good. When Kirtananda and Rai Ram returned to New York from San Francisco, they consulted with Brahmananda. Then Brahmananda went to Mr. Price, who promised that if somehow they couldn't get the building, he would return at least $750. The balance of the money represented travel in the devotees' interest. But they would get the building, Mr. Price assured them. Don't worry. Then Mr. Price told Brahmananda the latest. He had found a wealthy financier, Mr. Hall, who had almost agreed to pay the full $100,000 for the building. Mr. Price was working on Mr. Hall, who happened to be his close friend. Prospects seemed good, but the devotees would also have to do their part, Mr. Price explained, by putting up $5,000. Mr. Price would then arrange everything else. Mr. Price, because Mr. Hall was almost going to pay the $100,000, but he just had to give another $5,000. There's a lot of money in those days. Now it doesn't sound so much. Maybe 10 times more in those days. Mr. Price set up a meeting with an architect on Park Avenue, and soon Brahmananda and Satsrup were sitting with Mr. Price and his architect friend reviewing sketches. To give the building that authentic Indian temple look, the architect proposed a facade with arches and, if they liked, domes. It was wonderful. Of course, they didn't dare ask him how much it would cost. But Mr. Price even hinted that the work might be done free. Of course. After Mr. Price served himself and his architect friend some liquor and offered some of the boys, although they knew they wouldn't accept it, they offered it anyway. The two men held up tinkling glasses, smiled, and politely toasted themselves and the boys, saying, Hare Krishna. While going down on the elevator, Mr. Price spoke eloquently of the devotees' faith in God. He said that others might argue about the existence of God, but the most convincing thing was the devotees' personal experience. Your personal testimony, Mr. Price assured them, is the best argument. It is a very powerful thing. The boys nodded. Later, among themselves, they laughed about the liquor. But still, they figured these two men wanted to help. When Srila Prabhupada heard about the latest developments, he did not share his disciples' optimism. On February the 3rd, he wrote to Gargamuni. It's getting a bit exciting now. It hasn't finished yet, and the way it goes on, another 2 pages, I don't have time. I had a talk, Prabhupada writes to Gargamuni, I had a talk with your brother Brahmananda yesterday on the deal. I am glad that Mr. Price has promised to return the amount of $750 in case no sale contract is made. But in any case, you should not pay any farthing more than what you have already paid, either to the lawyer or to Mr. Price, unless there is actual sale contract made. It appears to me very gloomy about the transaction because there was no basic understanding before the payment of $1,000, either to the lawyer or the real estate. This is not businesslike. Unless there is a basic understanding, where is the way of transaction? If there was no basic understanding, why so much waste of time and energy? I cannot understand. And if there was basic understanding, why is it changed so quickly? I am therefore perturbed in the mind when there was no basic understanding. What was the need of appointing a lawyer? Anyway, it is my advice that you should consult me before issuing any further money, but I hope you will make the transaction successful without further delay. Srila Prabhupada also instructed Gargamuni to protect the $10,000 in the bank and never withdraw any sum that would leave a balance of less than $6,000. Prabhupada had left one account for which the devotees were the signers, but he also had an account for which he controlled the funds. He now asked the devotees to put $6,000 from their account into his. He wrote Brahmananda, this $6,000 will be transferred forthwith by me as soon as there is a sale contract for purchase of the house. On February the 10th, Prabhupada wrote to Kirtanananda, regarding the house, I was correct in my remarks that there was no definite understanding. In such negotiations, everything is done in black and white. Nothing is being done in black and white, but everything is being done with faith on Mr. Price. Let this understanding be completed within the 1st of March 1967 and close the chapter. I think this is my last word in this connection. You are all grown-up boys and you use your discretion, and you can now complete the transaction without prolonging it indefinitely. If, however, we are not able to purchase a house, it does not mean closing our activity at 26 2nd Avenue. So there is no question of packing up and coming to San Francisco. Then on February the 15th, Prabhupada wrote Satsvarup. So far I can see from the correspondence of Brahmananda, it is not possible for us to get the house for so many reasons. The main reason is that we have no money to pay cash, and nobody is going to invest cash in that house because it is neither complete nor has any income. It is simply utopian to think of possessing the house, and Mr. Price is simply giving us false hope. You are all innocent boys without any experience of the world. The cunning world can befool you at any time, so please be careful of the world in Krishna consciousness. When Krishna will desire, the house will come to us automatically. Prabhupada is dealing very carefully here with his disciples, knowing that they don't have much experience, they may be becoming very attached to this situation, etc. He also doesn't want to lose them. Srila Prabhupada's doubts were confirmed when Mr. Price wrote to him asking for money. If Mr. Price had so much money, Prabhupada reasoned, why was Mr. Price asking him for money? On February the 17th, Srila Prabhupada wrote to Mr. Price to impress upon him that there would have to be a sale contract before ISKCON could actually purchase the building. Prabhupada wrote, if there is a sale contract, my students here and in New York will be able to raise the fund very seriously. In the absence of any sale contract, everything appears to be in the air, and Mr. Tyler or his lawyer can change his word as he has already done. Srila Prabhupada's message was clear. Brahmananda, however, complained of poor communications. Things were always changing, and Brahmananda wasn't always able to get Swamiji's confirmation on the latest changes. Because on one side Prabhupada said, try to get the building by the 1st of March, on the other side he's saying this is not possible to do this is a dream. Different things were coming. Swamiji would write his instructions in the letter, and although the devotees had to obey whatever he said, the circumstances would often have changed by the time they received the letter. Those days with no WhatsApp, no internet, things were slow. Swamiji would also sometimes change his opinion when he heard new information. Sometimes Brahmananda would call San Francisco and Swamiji would not be available. Brahmananda didn't feel right about sending messages through the devotees in San Francisco because he knew that the devotees there were skeptical about the whole transaction. If New York got the building, San Francisco would have to donate $1,000. And the devotees in San Francisco, of course, had their own plans for how to spend money for Krishna. Mr. Price suggested to the devotees in New York that maybe the Swami didn't understand American business dealings. With all respect, His Excellency couldn't be expected to know all the intricacies of finance in a foreign country. Excuse the English accent. And His Excellency's request for a purchase contract was, as Mr. Price put it, something that went out with hoop skirts. Some kind of old-fashioned skirt that ladies used to wear has gone out, the skirt's out there and the hoop around. We don't do these things in America anymore. Of course they do, but he's trying to make it sound like they don't. Brahmananda and Satsvarup didn't know how to reply. The remarks seemed like blasphemy, but Brahmananda and Satsvarup were already entangled in the promises Mr. Price had given and went on meeting with him. They would meet with Mr. Price and then ride back to the 2nd Avenue on the subway chanting Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada wrote almost daily to various devotees in New York. On February 18th, he wrote a letter to Brahmananda with the word confidential typed at the top of the page. Now, if you think he is able to secure money for us, if you think that there is something hopeful by this time, then you can continue the negotiation as he is doing. But do not, for Krishna's sake, advance a farthing more on any plea by him. He may be trying his best, but he is not capable to do this. That is my honest opinion. While trying to avoid further losses in New York, Prabhupada continued his activity preaching in San Francisco. Mukunda and the others were lining up lots of engagements, and the reception was often very enthusiastic. In the same confidential letter to Brahmananda, in which Prabhupada put forward his strategies for negotiating with Mr. Price and company, he also wrote glowingly of grand, successful meetings at various Bay Area colleges. The meetings were similar, he said, to the wonderful kirtans in Tompkins Square Park. This was the way to spread Krishna consciousness, not by becoming entangled with treacherous real estate agents. He wrote, I am enclosing herewith a copy of the letter received from Himalayan Academy. See how they are appreciating our method of peace movement. So in this way we have to forward our cause. No businessman will come forward to help us on utopian schemes as contemplated by Mr. Price. We have to try for ourselves. So the summary is to obtain a hire purchase sale contract from Mr. Tyler and popularize our movement by outdoor engagements, as many as possible. Srila Prabhupada had done what he could. The boys were foolish even to the point of not listening to him. But they had raised the money themselves. If, despite his instructions, they lost it, what further help could he give? So he simply went on with his San Francisco preaching and advised the boys in New York also to become convinced of achieving success through kirtan. End of chapter. But it's not the end of the Price affair. You'll have to wait for next time to find out more. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The next section is one of my favorite sections, but what to do, we can't read it now. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Be careful. Any comments or questions? You can see how careful Prabhupada was with money, I can tell you. He was so careful. He used to keep a record of every cent he would spend. Every cent. Very careful. Nowadays people are not so familiar with this. Everything's online now, so they don't deal with money so much. It's all recorded there in their records. Supposed to be. Now, because of that, people are dealing in the black. Everything's in the black. They don't declare it. They don't keep records. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Pardon?
So inspiring, this Janananda tattoo.
That song, yeah. Amazing.
Another super.
Excuse me?
The place on Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house. You remember the name?
Yes, Sarabi Sukabda Sarabi Kunj.
They see it. Jalangi,